The artist of the day is The Clash, Steve. We were over here laughing about elephants doing yoga because you got hurt doing yoga last week.
I did.
And if an elephant can hold its own body weight and do it, not even...
I should be able to.
Yeah, it was like the elephant was like doing a handstand. Not getting hurt. You couldn't do it. I made fun of Steve over the weekend, by the way. I sent him a video of a nursing home, and they all had yoga ball. The elderly people were in a circle with yoga balls and were playing drums on the yoga balls.
Yes.
And I told them not to do it.
So I wouldn't get hurt.
Yeah.
And I legit laughed out loud, and then my wife was like, "What are you laughing at?" And I had to explain the whole story to her. So thank you for embarrassing me in front of my wife.
Did she laugh?
She did.
Good.
Yeah, of course she did.
I have a feeling Aaron Solomon likes The Clash.
Yeah, let's bring him on. Let's
ask my
ask him.
vibe on Aaron Solomon.
Our good friend Aaron Solomon, head of strategy at Esquire Digital. Aaron, do you enjoy The Clash?
Aaron don't like it. No, he does. He likes it. They're okay. I'm going to rock the Casbah with you guys today anyway.
All right.
Excellent. All right, so we appreciate you coming on short notice. Help us talk through this whole situation with LeQuint Allen and the Orange. And I guess let's start with the legal aspect of this, and that LeQuint Allen is suing to get back into school so that he can enroll, so that he can play. What are the chances that this works? Explain what he's trying to accomplish with this lawsuit.
So the first thing I want to do is I want to help Orange fans all over the world take a deep breath. Connect with yourselves. Do a little yoga, because everybody in Syracuse is as fired up about this as they would be in Chapel Hill or Bloomington or wherever. Now, I want to look at this just through the legal lens. And the most important thing to do that is to forget about the fact that LeQuint Allen is a star football player, because absolutely nobody's going to care. What the judge is going to look at here is, did Syracuse University treat LeQuint Allen any differently than other students have been treated in the past? And that's going to mean, what rules were out there that were violated when this third-degree assault took place? And is the punishment for those violations the same here as has happened in the past? That's all that's going to look at. The fact that he's a football player or would be a lacrosse player or would be a world-class physicist doesn't matter at all.
So what would it take for it to be a precedent for the university? Just one other case, or will it have to be multiple cases for this judge to see that this was the typical punishment?
The first thing that the judge is going to look at is, what in the rules of being a Syracuse University student was violated here? So they're actually going to look at text. They're going to look at text that every enrolled student has to follow as far as behavioral expectations, because that's what the university is going to argue. Now, from the facts that we've all looked at, and we've looked at the same articles and the same set of facts that have been released so far, it seems to me that something that LeQuint Allen hasn't had yet and is going to get now is good counsel and a good advocate. Because again, from the facts that have been presented to us in the public and that have been released to date, it seems, I feel comfortable saying, that it seems like a pretty harsh result for this young man so far. So the court is going to look at, did the actions that LeQuint Allen committed, whether it was partially in self-defense or partially in retribution for already having been assaulted, did they violate the enrollment agreement that a student at Syracuse University is there for? If so, was the punishment that Syracuse University meted out in line with what any student can expect? And then, as I said before, is it in line with what the university's done in the past? And a really good advocate for this young person is going to say, oh, we've seen 3 cases where there was a similar act and a very dissimilar punishment, if that's the case.
All right, so let's say, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, what if in this case there isn't prior cases where someone was punished this much, but in the bylaws it says that it could be a punishment this great?
Yeah, I guess I have the same question, Aaron. Like, if the judge finds that something's not right here, what can be done? Like, what you know, he can't force Syracuse University to put him back on the football field, right? So I guess what can be done?
But again, my understanding of the case is that it's not an issue of being on or off the football field. It's not being able to attend the university, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
right.
a judge can absolutely.
Can the judge say
100%?
Oh, okay.
A judge can say the court decides that the punishment is not aligned with the actions, meaning what the student did. The punishment that you've given them isn't part of what their contractual relationship with the university is. In other words, the punishment's too severe. This student has to be allowed to re-enroll in the university. In that case, it gets a little more complicated because common sense would dictate the student can then be back on the football team. Maybe the football team has specific behavioral regulations and agreements, but you would think generally that if a student is allowed to enroll at the university, they can play intercollegiate athletics.
I guess my question was a little bit different than that. What I was asking was, what if the precedent isn't there that somebody was suspended for a year, but the bylaws say you can be suspended that long?
The court is absolutely going to look at what's been done in similarly situated situations, as complicated as that sounds. So has there been a situation where, again, from the facts as we have them today, a student, forget about student athlete, forget about that whole thing, a student has been hit in the face a couple of times and in return has hit somebody in the face? How has that student been dealt with? In other words, a student's been assaulted, assaults somebody back, perhaps they're in fear for their life, their safety, whatever the case is. How has the university done in a situation like that with the students' continuing enrollment at the school? And if the attorneys for LeQuint can say, you know what, our client, Mr. Allen, has been treated differently, then the court is going to look very, very strongly at that and say, why has this student been singled out for different treatment?
So just so I'm clear on this, Aaron, so even though Syracuse is a private institution, the court can rule that Syracuse has to allow that student to be able to re-enroll in classes?
Sure, why not? The private institution, public institution, it doesn't matter at all. If what Syracuse University did by giving a year-long suspension to the student for an action that happened on campus is violative of their own rules, and again, I'm not saying that it is, we don't know, this is what a court's going to be able to be found out for, then a possible remedy to make that student whole, as we say in the law, could be the court ordering a return to school. It doesn't matter whether it's SUNY or Syracuse.
All right, interesting. All right, so let's, for the sake of argument, say that the suspension is upheld and that he's out for a year. And he's missed the opportunity to put his name in the transfer portal, because right now the transfer portal is closed for football players. Is there any avenue he could go down in that regard to force his way out of Syracuse? I mean, he's not enrolled at Syracuse, but I guess force his way into another football program somewhere else. Would he have any recourse?
Well, okay, so two parts to that question that I see. The first part is the question that you asked, is if NCAA rules don't give an out to somebody who's involved in a legal matter that makes them miss the transfer portal. And again, I don't have the NCAA regulations in front of me, but I would doubt that they do. Then he has no recourse there. And the recourse wouldn't be against Syracuse University in that case. It would be against the people who make the transfer portal rules, which would be the NCAA. However, remember, everything that we've been talking about so far has been a criminal matter. If LeQuint Allen and his attorneys feel that he has sustained damages that could be perhaps remedied in a civil court, there could be a possibility for a civil action against the university.
Interesting. Huh.
To say, for example, this student athlete's future wages, future income has been harmed by an unjust decision from the university. We peg that at X amount of dollars, and we would choose to go after the university in a civil claim, since the university has barred him from participating in intercollegiate athletics.
Let me ask you another question. This led me into thinking, too. If you have an NIL deal with LeQuint Allen right now, and he's out for a year due to a suspension, how do they handle that situation? Is he obligated to still be their spokesperson or do whatever they had asked him to? Or, Is it depend on the contract?
It's, every time you guys have me on, my stock answer is, well, it depends on the contract, but it does. Every NIL deal isn't governed by like a blanket NIL contract. The car dealership in Syracuse has a contractual agreement with a student athlete to say, you're going to do this for us, and in exchange, this is what you're going to get in return, right? It's called consideration. Legal consideration for performing that service. So it depends. There may be a clause. I bet you there's a behavioral clause in almost NIL thing, right? So in every NIL contract, there should be a clause that says, if you behave in a way that we, the car dealership, feels reflects our brand in a negative way, then we can terminate this within 30 days.
I see some people in our chat section at qsportstalk.com asking a similar type of question that I have. So if he is not enrolled in classes at Syracuse University, some people are asking, why does he have to enter the transfer portal to go somewhere else? My understanding with that, though, is that that's the only way he would be able to play right away, correct?
Correct.
The NCAA rules say you have to go through the transfer portal process, and then you get a one-time transfer, you can play right away. So he could, technically speaking, transfer somewhere else without going through the portal, but then he would have to sit out a year, correct?
Sure. Well, he's allowed to withdraw, even with this punishment that's happening now. Any student can withdraw from Syracuse University today. But that transfer portal gives essentially an exemption to get around what historically didn't exist. There was never historically, back in my day, an exemption. You had to sit out a year all the time. So it is an exemption for that, which he would not qualify for if he just said, I choose not to pursue this anymore. I choose to leave Syracuse University and want to play somewhere else. That's what the transfer portal is for. And there's no exemption to that for I choose to do it because I've been suspended for legal reasons.
Right. Okay. And I know that you're just kind of studying up on this, and we appreciate all the hard work you've put in today. But can I ask you for how you think this is going to play itself out, or do you feel like you don't know enough of the facts at this point?
Well, it seems to me that to get to this point, after both the formal and informal investigation that Alan asked for, the university is pretty dug in. It seems at this point that the university is not going to undig themselves from this position. So it's going to be up to the court to decide what Syracuse did was fair and legal based on the agreement they would have with any student for student behavior. And that's going to depend upon statutory law. It's going to depend upon the contracts. My gut sense is for the university to take it this far and not want to negotiate with the student, not want to make an offer to reduce the suspension. They're comfortable rolling the dice that the court is going to support them.
All right. Not great news for SU football fans. Listen, before we let you go, we do have to ask you about some other things. And, this Live Tours continues to be in the news. And we've seen the Saudi Arabian financially backed Live Tour. And we've seen soccer players go to play for more money over there in the Saudi leagues. From what I understand, you've got some information about another sport that may soon be getting some money from the Saudi government. Is that correct?
The Saudis are going to make a significant investment in the ATP men's tennis tour. Now, anybody's saying, well, what about the WTA? They're not going to be making an investment in the women's tour. This also comes at a very interesting time because just today, the WTA released some very interesting news. And part of that news was based on the fact that, as everybody knows, even if you're not a huge tennis fan, men and women are paid differently in tennis. And the WTA announced today that by both 2027 and 2033, depending on whether or not the men and women are playing the same tournament at the same time, or they're playing the same tournament at different times, they are on a path to making prize money equal. Now, that's, of course, a huge step forward in the vision of Billie Jean King and the WTA that's been around since the 70s. But the reason they're wording it like we are on a path towards this is because there's no way the WTA and their sponsors are going to be able to get even close to gender and pay equity if the Saudi investment funds ends up putting the kind of money in that I believe they are. And if people ask me, which they have the past few days, how much money do I think the Saudis are going to put into men's tennis? Billions.
Really? Billions with a B.
And by the way, for those who do follow tennis, it's also going to mean, in my prediction, a change on how tennis is done in the long run, because the Saudis aren't interested in 500 and 250 level tournaments. What the Saudis really want is what you see in the Live Tour. They want to see the best tennis players and the most charismatic tennis players, people like Nick Kyrgios, tour the world doing exhibitions. So it's going to be a market change if the Saudis get their way.
Wow. Yeah, Paulie.
I did want to hit you on one other thing, throw you a curveball from right field here on NIL. You know, the West Virginia situation has gotten really interesting with Bob Huggins getting the DUI, being replaced, and they had an interesting situation happen. The NCAA says you cannot pay players to play basketball, you know, still, even with NIL. And one of the car dealerships out there tweeted out over the weekend, don't worry, folks, we're pulling together to keep this team together. And it announced they're making NIL deals to keep players on after Bob Huggins left. You know, is in your eyes, is that something that could come back to bite them, that they're tweeting out that we're paying players to stay on at West Virginia?
So I can't say anything now, but there's going to be a news piece released today or tomorrow that's going to talk. So have me on back anytime you want, but it's going to talk about one idea for someone who's starting a company that's going to change how NIL is done. And it's going to run counter to the letter and spirit of NIL. So at this point, given the fact that we always talk about NIL being the wild, wild west, people can do whatever they can get away with doing. But there are going to be some changes to the way people want to do NIL, and it's going to be extremely interesting over the next few months and years.
I got one more on the NIL for you. In the situation at West Virginia, if those players were paid up front and Huggins left and they left, they get the money, right?
Oh, you know, listen, absolutely. No, everything is determined by the contract between the players. So let's say, for example, to lure a player to West Virginia as opposed to Ohio State or Miami, Florida, they said, look, we want you to do $700,000. I'm picking a Jesse Edwards number, right? We want you to do $700,000 worth of NIL work for us, but we're going to give you that money up front and trust that over your time at the university, whether you're one and done or whatever the case is, you're going to do certain things for us to give us value. If they pay that money up front according to the agreement and the student leaves or whatever, that's the way it is. It's all based on what the contract says. And I believe that since this is pay to play, guys, I believe that part of the way that universities incentivize students to choose one university over the other is to say cash up front in a lot of situations, and they cannot go back after that money. Plus, come on, guys, who's paying an NIL deal that wants a court to start looking at NIL contracts? Nobody.
Yeah, right. Right. I know we've kept you a significant amount of time here. I got one more for you if I can slide it in. So you mentioned the Saudis' involvement with tennis. Are there any other sports that you think, you know, coming up in the near future or down the line that the Saudis will get involved in other than, you know, golf and soccer, now tennis? Anything else down the line?
100% the National Basketball Association. The NBA changed their bylaws this past season to allow sovereign wealth funds. I want to do the Dr. Evil finger. Sovereign wealth funds, you say, to have ownership stakes in teams. So they're going to take an ownership stake in as many teams as humanly possible, because what better to use as a vehicle than the National Basketball Association, which has a massive global following.
Yeah. Wow. Aaron, we always love having you on. Yeah, we always learn so much when you come on. Thanks so much for giving us a few minutes of your time, and I'm sure that we'll be hitting you up again very soon. I want to say one more thing to
everybody. If you've been following the NBA and you've been following the draft of Victor Wembanyama, you've got to say, whether you're a Spurs fan or not, or a fan of this young man or not, what a fantastic job he's done from being in the spotlight from minute one. He's doing all the right things. He's saying all the right things. And I'm not someone who believes that he's going to be the greatest player in NBA history, but what a great example for every young person in college who wants to go to the pros one day about what to do and what not to do. Follow what this guy is saying and follow what this guy's doing.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. He seems like a very impressive young man. Aaron, love having you on. Be well. Enjoy the start of your summer, and we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
All right, Aaron Solomon, our good friend from head of strategy at Esquire Digital. You can find his work at todaysesquire.com. And with that, we'll hit a timeout. Phone lines open the rest of the way. 315-437-7644. Back after this on ESPN Radio.